The ending of the main story didn't fully come together for me. It was a mix of emotions. Part of me thought it was great, but some felt like something was missing. Final Fight caught me off guard, not just because of how intense it was, but because of how long it went on. And while the moment itself was powerful, I do think they could have done better with corrupted Caliburn's design. But the biggest thing for me is Umbra. It just suddenly exists, and then it becomes the central to the ending. The witch, Alastin, and even the masters never once mentioned it. They just keep telling you what you need to do and how they put you through these trials, give you tools and companions in order to be able to restore the balance. There are some hints, like the researchers noticed a strange glow near the Gate of Truth on Kingshield Mountain. Marnie's technology somehow made contact with the Abyss and he lost control over Hall. All those are just faint, if anything, unnoticeable hints of the game. I'm sure that I missed a lot of pieces, items, or maybe even dialogues because I was busy with the exploration. That said, the Umbra fight itself, it delivered. There's something about it that feels both angelic and dark at the same time, and I think that contrast is exactly what they were going for. It pulls you in so much that you almost lose track of time while it's happening. But even after all that, I'm still left with questions like, how did Unka even get here? So I tried to look deeper into things and I came across these archive entries in the Axiom archive. It'll appear after you completed the Restoration Abyss challenge. They're easy to miss, but reading through them gave me a better understanding of what happened. So I'm going to show you how I made sense of the story and what I experienced during my playthrough. This is a major spoiler, so watch at your own risk. The Abyss is a separate layer of reality, always existing in the background. The more chaos there is, the closer the Abyss gets to the surface. That's why in the game, the Abyss Gates shows up in areas where there's heavy conflict, places tied to artifacts, locations where something feels off or unnatural. Now, how this connects to Umbra. The Abyss is the source, or the energy, or the force, and Umbra is what happens when that force takes form and grows stronger. Even though it's just a force, Umbra can take form, influence people, create or control beings. Before our playthrough, there were other timelines where everything already failed. There was even a point where the Guardians tried to escape Umbra by traveling through time, thinking they could avoid what was going to happen, but it didn't work. Umbra still returns, and the same fate repeats. That's when they realized they couldn't just run from it, they had to change it, and to do that they needed someone who could break the cycle. Umbra's real role in the story is the other side of the cycle, the thing that keeps coming back, the thing every timeline is trying to stop. So they began searching, they started observing where Umbra's power was appearing, and watching places like Demonis and Pyloon, trying to find someone capable of stopping it. And eventually they found Cliff. Not because he was perfect, but because he had potential. Someone strong, determined, and willing to keep going no matter what. So they began guiding him, watching him, speaking to his mind, trying to push him towards certain choices. They tried to give him power, even borrowing energy from Shy and attempting to pass on the power of the crow. But they were versions of Cliff that didn't trust the voices, versions that couldn't accept the power, versions that failed trials, lost allies, or took the wrong path. They kept trying different methods, giving him more power, sending him to different people, shaping his journey in different ways, but none of it worked. Everything kept leading to the same result: failure. They tried giving him allies like Kearush, but that ended in disaster, with everything spiraling out of control. They sent him to the witches to restore balance to the abyss, but he kept failing their trials. At one point, he even became stuck in a normal life, losing direction completely. So they kept adjusting things, changing the world around him, even creating a more peaceful version of places like Pailun, but even that didn't last. The war still came, and they realized he needed stronger allies, people like Unka, to even stand a chance. But outside forces began interfering. People like Marnie introduced things that made the path even more unstable. And eventually, one of these timelines created something much worse. That's when Goyen comes in. He is a failed version of Cliff who gave in to the power. But instead of stopping the cycle, he became part of the problem. Now, he exists in this strange state, not fully alive, not fully gone, but trapped within Umbra. That's why when you fight him, it feels similar. Because in a way, you're fighting what Cliff could have become. After so many failed attempts, the people guiding Cliff became more desperate, and they didn't just try to guide his actions anymore. They started trying to control him more deeply, even his emotions. They tried removing fear, but that made him reckless and led to his death. They increased his sense of responsibility, but that made him lose himself, trying to fix everything alone. And honestly, this explains why Cliff sometimes feels emotionless or distant during the game. It's not bad writing, it's intentional. He's being shaped almost like an experiment, and even with all that control, it still doesn't work. And while all of this was happening, Umbra itself is also adapting and growing, learning, and even looking for someone of its own. So now, it's not just good versus evil. It's both sides trying to claim the same person. Both sides are trying to shape Cliff into something that will decide the outcome. And even the Greymanes, the group that feels like Cliff's family, their story, their struggles, even their downfall, all play a role in shaping him. It all pushes Cliff closer to the edge. And for a long time, the ones guiding him thought this was necessary. They thought pain, pressure, and control would create the version of him they needed, but they were wrong. At some point, they finally realized what they've been missing the whole time. It wasn't power, it wasn't control, it was something much simpler. Human connection. Small acts, helping people, building real relationship, the kind of things that don't seem important in a big story, but actually are. That's why moments where Cliff helped others, even in small ways, end up mattering more than anything else. That's what they failed to understand in all the previous timelines. Even Goyen, the failed version, is now seen differently, not just as a mistake, but something that might still help guide this version of Cliff. And that brings us back to the ending we experience. Cliff is once again faced with the same kind of choice: power or humanity, control or staying himself. And this time, he rejects the power. He doesn't win in the usual sense. He doesn't fix everything. The world is still broken. It's just calmer. But what makes this moment important is that he didn't repeat the same mistake. He didn't become like Goyen. He didn't continue the cycle. But even then, the story doesn't feel complete. And now we know why. Because this isn't really an ending, it's just the latest attempt. The people guiding him were running out of chances. Umbra was getting stronger, cycle was speeding up, and even they didn't fully understand what's missing. That's why the ending feels kind of empty. Not because it's bad, but because it's unfinished by design. So in the end, the story isn't really about winning or losing. It's about trying to break something that has already failed many times before. So that's my take on the ending and how I pieced everything together from my playthrough and those archive entries. If you have a different perspective or something that I missed in the story, let's talk about it in the comments. Thanks for watching.